Mga ka-cheers and classmates, and of course to our brilliant professor, Sir Manuel Roman, I'm Marcelo D. Alonsabe, your discussant for today. Welcome to my video presentation about the termination of employment and the Human Resource Monthly Report. This is for partial fulfillment for the EM216 subject or the Personal Management and Development. I hope you will enjoy this video presentation.
So let us start with the definition of the terminology. So termination is referred to, it is the separation of the employee from the organization. This process is used by firms when the closed facilities reduce their workforce or respond to continued poor performance. Termination of employment in the Philippines, unlike the United States of America, which has at-will employment, doctrine employers in the Philippines can only terminate their relationship with an employee if a just or authorized cause, as defined under the law, has been established after undergoing due process. Thus, terminating an employee in the country is taken very seriously and can be a complex process, especially since, when in doubt, the labor code of the Philippines is construed in favor of employees.
So we have two major types of termination. Termination for cause or termination voluntary resignation, and with the company or the termination by employer. So termination for cause, we have ethical violations, performance related issues, poor personality fit or attitude fit. So when we say termination for cause or voluntary resignation, this type of termination is strengthened by the provisions of Article 285 of the Labor Code, which recognizes two kinds of termination. An employee can initiate without just cause and with just cause. If the resignation is without just cause, the employee must give 1 month advance written notice for resignation, commonly referred to as a resignation letter, to the employer to enable them to look for a replacement and prevent work disruption. If the employee fails to provide a resignation letter, he or she runs the risk of incurring liability for damages. If the resignation is with just cause, however, the employee need not serve a resignation notice. Article 285 indicates the just causes for resignation as follows: serious insult to the honor and person of the employee, inhuman and unbearable treatment accorded the employee by the employer or his representative, crime committed against the person of the employee or any immediate members of the employee's family, and other similar causes. It should be noted that employees who voluntarily resign from work are not entitled to separation pay. The Philippine laws only grant separation pay to those who were dismissed from service not due to their own fault or negligence, but for reasons that are beyond their control, example business closure, cessation of operation, retrenchment, reduction of costs, to prevent losses, and etc. However, there are at least two cases where employees who resign voluntarily may be entitled to separation pay, and they are as follows. When payment of separation pay is provided in the employment contract or collective bargaining agreement, CBA for companies with existing bargaining agent or labor union, and when it is authorized by established company practice or policy. So a voluntary resignation means or defined as a voluntary act of committed by employees who knowingly dissociate themselves from their employment for personal reasons. It does not cover instances where employees are forced to resign with the use of threats, intimidation, coercion, manipulation, or where dismissal is imposed as a penalty for an offense. Forced or coerced resignation is illegal and considered constructive dismissal, a dismissal in disguise. So next we have with the company, termination with the company, or also known as termination by employer. So if it has an attendance issues, violating company policies, lack of work. So, termination by employer is actually defined as employers can dismiss an employee based on just and authorized causes. Just causes are based on acts attributable to an employee's own wrongful actions or negligence, while authorized causes refer to lawful grounds for termination which do not arise from fault or negligence of the employee. Termination by employer. According to Article 282 of the Labor Code, an employer can terminate an employee for just causes, which could be any of the following: serious misconduct or willful disobedience by the employee of the lawful orders of his employer or representative in connection with his work; gross and habitual neglect by the employee of his duties; fraud or willful breach by the employee of the trust reposed in him by his employer or duly authorized representatives; commission of a crime or offense by the employee against the person of his employer or any immediate member of his family or his duly authorized representatives, and other similar causes. Employers can also terminate an employee based on authorized causes like business and health reasons. Article 283 of the Labor Code states that an employee can be terminated due to business reasons such as installation of labor-saving devices, redundancy, retrenchment, or the reduction of costs to prevent losses, or the closing or cessation of operation. For termination of employment based on health reasons, employers are allowed to terminate employees found suffering from any disease and whose continued employment is prohibited by law or is prejudicial to his health as well as to the health of his workers. The employer must obtain from a competent public health authority a certification that the employee's disease is of such a nature and at such a stage that it can no longer be cured within a period of 6 months, even with medical retention. Termination of employment are also called as layoffs, and it has many forms. So it could be in the form of attrition, early retirement programs, job sharing, group dismissal. But there is what we call the due process in termination of employment. Due process in the context of employment termination is the right of an employee to be notified of the reason for his or her dismissal, and in case of just causes, to be provided the opportunity to defend himself or herself. The due process is different for both authorized and just causes. Just cause involves a 2-notice rule, while authorized cause requires a 30-day notice. If due process is not accorded to the employee before termination of the employment or the termination itself is declared illegal, the employee is entitled to receive reinstatement in full back wages as stated in the Article 279 of Labor Code. If reinstatement is no longer possible where the dismissal was unjust, separation pay may be granted. Dismissals based on just causes involve the 2-notice rule. A written notice, commonly referred to as a notice to explain, is specifying the grounds for termination and giving the employee ample opportunity to explain their side. A hearing or conference to allow the employee to respond to the charge or charges, present evidence or rebut the evidence presented against them, and a notice of decision indicating the justification for termination as well as the corresponding sanctions, if any, after due consideration of all evidence. Due process for authorized causes. Dismissals based on authorized causes involve the following: submission of a written notice of dismissal to the employee specifying the grounds for dismissal at least 30 days before the date of termination, and a copy of the notice which shall be provided to Regional Office of the Department of Labor and Employment or the DOLE where the employer is located. When do you need to fire an employee? If you have taken the necessary steps to help the employee improve his work performance and they are not working, it may be time. The 3 distinct stages for a well-managed terminations for cause. First, notify the employee, then there should be a development program, and then termination. 3 critical factors to consider before any employee. Factor number 1, fight or flight. How the problem employee will take advantage of you. Then number 2, your problem employee will destroy your morale and results if you don't do something about it today. Factor number 3, the longer you wait, the harder it is to terminate the problem employee. The do's and don'ts of terminating employees to keep you out of hot water. What to do? Make the firing decision carefully, but once made, act quickly. Number 2, ensure that multiple meetings have been held with employee. Be respectful and discreet. Ensure that use severance or notice arrangement meet the legal requirements. Ensure that you have a written termination letter and release which documents the terms and conditions of the termination. What not to do? Don't get personal. Don't make a decision to terminate for cause without conducting a proper investigation. Don't hold the termination meeting in a public place. Don't go into a termination meeting unprepared. And the last, don't get defensive or debate the merits of the firing decision with the employee. Let's move on with the Human Resource Monthly Report. So I'm going to show to you guys the labor turnover statistics of the NCR for the first and second quarters. So employment in establishments in CR Post continues to drop in the first half of 2021. The first and second quarters of 2021 posted drops in employment in establishments located in the NCR as community quarantines due to coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic were continuously implemented during the period. During the first quarter of 2021, labor turnover was posted at negative 3.1% and it continued to weaken during the second quarter at negative 1.2%. This can be translated to reductions of 31 workers in the first quarter, while 12 workers in the second quarter for every 1,000 persons employed in the establishments. The accession rates for the 2 quarters were recorded at 7.3% and 7%. This means that for every 1,000 employed persons, 73 and 70 workers respectively were hired either for business expansion or as replacement for separated workers. Similarly, separation rates indicated that for every 1,000 employed, 104 workers for the first quarter and 81 workers for the second quarter were either laid off by their employers or quitted their jobs. Now let's move on to the next figure. So agricultural sector recovers from employment declines by sector. Agriculture, forestry, and fishing recorded improvements at 8.4% in the first quarter and 1.4% in the second quarter. Meanwhile, similar trend was observed in the industry and services sectors wherein employment declines were recorded for the 2 quarters. However, both sectors depicted negative labor turnover at a slower pace in the second quarter at negative 1.9% for industry and negative 1% in the services sector. The decline in the industry sector was due to the reduction of workforce in the manufacturing and construction for both periods. In the services sector, drops in employment in the first quarter were contributed by 7 out of 12 subsectors with remarkable decrease in the administrative support. The decline in the industry sector was due to the reduction of workforce in the manufacturing and construction for both periods. In the services sector, drops in employment in the first quarter were contributed by 7 out of 12 subsectors with remarkable decrease in the administrative support and services activities, negative 6.6%, followed by accommodation and food service activities with negative 4.4%, and arts, entertainment, and recreation 3.6%. For the second quarter, 9 out of 12 industries contributed to the employment declines in the services sector, which was predominantly posted in education 6.9% and accommodation and food service activities 2.3%.